You actually were in Greeley for your doctorate?
Yes, I was.
How about that? Do you know Aaron Given?
I know Aaron Given quite well.
Well, he's episode number 30 and you're episode number 31.
I can't believe it.
And that is completely coincidence.
That is amazing. That's just amazing. Aaron, I have not seen him in years, but he was a big part of my program there. He was an undergrad when I was doing my work there. He's fabulous.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer, and this is episode number 31. My guest for this episode is Emily Moss. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening and for your support. If you find value from the show and haven't already done so, please leave me a rating on iTunes. You can follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and if you're really loving what you hear, you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Mark J. Connor. Now, on to the episode. Hi, Emily.
Hey, Mark. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Could you tell the listeners about your career and who you are?
Sure. So my title is the Director of Bands, and actually currently I'm the chair as well of the Department of Music at California State University in Los Angeles. I'm going to set aside my chair duties for a moment and speak about what I do music-wise, because in terms of being a conductor and a teacher, that's a little bit more relevant to the podcast. But we have two bands here. We have Wind Ensemble and Symphonic Band, and I also administer the music education area, we'll call it that. So I have the great pleasure of training future music educators, something I deeply love, and I teach them instrumental techniques class and conducting class, and just generally how to be good musicians for their future students.
Yeah, I'm a proud graduate of the Cal State system myself. I have my undergraduate from Cal State Chico way back in the early 90s.
Yeah, I would say I'm a very proud CSU employee, and I'm really proud of the work that we do here. Absolutely.
So can you tell the listeners about how you got your musical start, your origin story?
Sure. So I come from a relatively non-musical family. I had a grandfather who I grew up, he played piano, but it was all mostly from ear, and did show tunes, Broadway tunes, and kind of sang and played at the piano. But other than that, not a lot of musicians in my family. But it was important to my mother growing up. So she had us playing piano lessons from an early age. I think I probably started at 5 or so. And I really enjoyed music, but was one of those kids that did it rather reluctantly, piano lessons in particular. And once I had the opportunity to join my school band in 5th grade, my mom said, as long as I'm doing some kind of music, that it was okay with her. So I quickly quit my piano lessons and took up the alto saxophone in my fifth grade band on Whidbey Island, which is north of Seattle, just south of the San Juan Islands in the Pacific Northwest. So it was a small school, and but we had a great band director. He happened to be my band director from middle school through high school. And I think by the end of about 6th grade, he saw that I needed a little more of a challenge and asked me if I was interested in trying another instrument, and put a bassoon in front of me. And of course, my first question was, what is that? Never seen one before. And so I enthusiastically picked up a second instrument and played alto saxophone in jazz and bassoon in concert band. And thus my music career really started flourishing. I got involved in a local youth symphony, first the Everett Youth Symphony, where I had several students from my high school. We had to take the ferry boat in on Monday night for 2 years. We did that, and to go in for rehearsals. And then I discovered the Seattle Youth Symphony, and had a lot of wonderful musical training through my years. I'm extremely grateful to the Seattle Youth Symphony organization for really fostering my love of music. So interestingly, I really was an orchestra kid to start. Yes, I played in my high school band, but that was just kind of what I did at my school. But where I really found my identity as a musician was really through orchestra. And I then went on to the University of Washington for my undergrad, and quickly joined the orchestra, not the band, and was playing bassoon and contrabassoon for the UW orchestra. And actually, it was the band director there, Tim Salzman, who approached me towards, I think it was maybe midway through my sophomore year, and basically said, "Hey, aren't you a music ed major?" And of course I was. I knew at a very early age that I wanted to be a music teacher. And I said, yeah, I am. And he said, "Well, why aren't you in the band?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm playing in the orchestra and enjoying it." He said, "Why don't you give it a try? Why don't you join the band next quarter, and we'll swap you out with another bassoonist, and if you like it, you can stay." And sure enough, that next quarter we played Maslanka's Fourth Symphony, and it totally changed my life. My experience of band was high school band, and we weren't all that good, and playing the whole suite badly. And so here I was introduced to this epic piece of music for wind band, and had the experience of playing parts that as I'd never seen before. And anyway, that's kind of what turned the tide, so to speak, for me. And my love of band and band repertoire began there and has not stopped.
Yeah, that's interesting that it was the Maslanka that you encountered. Was that your first semester in band?
Yes, that was my very first semester. It was actually quarters. UW was in the quarter system, and I think it was winter quarter is my memory of my sophomore year. So I spent almost a year and a half in the orchestra. Yeah, interesting.
I'm wondering if you hadn't sort of encountered a piece of that stature, a piece like that, would it have stuck quite the way it did? I just think that's really kind of serendipitous.
Yeah, I do too. And Tim Salzman is known for being very innovative in his programming, and we did a lot of cutting edge pieces while I played in his group, and that really, I think that certainly shaped my initial impressions of the medium, and got to see and hear firsthand what's sort of possible with that group.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't mention this earlier, but it's actually even more ironic / funny that, I didn't just say I wanted to be a music teacher. Like, I wanted to be a band director. Like, I knew I wanted to be a band director in schools. And yet there I was playing the orchestra. I hadn't quite connected the two. And I really credit him with doing that for me. And I get the privilege of doing that for my students now, of making the connection between your personal music making and what you're going to eventually do for your students.
Yeah, one of the things I think is that as teachers, we connect things that our teachers taught us to inform what we do. What else from Tim Salzman can you think of that maybe informs your current teaching? Well,
I would say his artistry in conducting certainly influenced me. He has a very fluid and beautiful approach, and I hadn't really experienced that before. I would also say something that I always remembered about him and his rehearsing is he really had a beautiful voice in modeling the music. I happen to have spent a lot of time in my life singing. My mother was a children's theater director, and so growing up, I was on stage and did theater and musical theater. So I actually sang quite a bit and sang in my choir. And in fact, I even toyed around with the idea of being a choral director because I enjoyed singing so much. But so his use of his voice in rehearsal was something that I admired so much, and I certainly do that now and encourage my students to do that as well.
That's interesting. I teach freshman oral skills, and I tell my students that even if you can't sing, your voice is the only thing you carry around with you all the time. You have it on command.
Yeah.
And especially if you're going to be a teacher. I use it all the time. I just finished teaching a music appreciation class, and I'm teaching, I don't have recordings of everything I want to talk about. So a lot of times I'm singing Broadway show tunes, and I'm not a great singer, but I've got it. It's in my pocket. So singing is important.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I say similar things, and I will tell them things like, look, if you don't feel like you can hit all the pitches correctly, then model the articulation. Model the note length that you want. It doesn't have to just be beautiful tone and pitches that you can model. Don't limit yourself. So,
what does that look like? What's your music education program like at Cal State LA?
Well, first and foremost, we are training them to be excellent musicians. This is a really big part of my philosophy that, your students are only going to be as good a musician as you are. And so I take great pride in making sure that our music ed students are really fine musicians, and that is really what they should take away from their undergraduate program. Without getting into too much detail about it, the part of my doctoral dissertation was about skills of effective music teachers and where you acquire those skills. And, one of the points that came out of that research was that the time that you're in your undergrad degree is the main time in your life where you're learning to be a musician and learning how to learn how to be a musician on your own. So if we, give them some teaching skills, but first and foremost, they're coming out really confident in their abilities as musicians, then they have a fighting chance. Is the way I see it. That being said, we also have extensive techniques classes, and I tell them that you've got to be proficient at a roughly a 6th or 7th grade level on all the instruments you're planning to teach. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to be a band director, and you play the trumpet, you better be able to play flute and clarinet pretty darn well, because you need to make oral identifications of what's wrong and how to fix it. Because no one else is going to do that for you.
Right. No question. And you think when you become a band director, and then you don't know. You realize what you don't know.
And then you don't. And then you don't.
And then you lean back on what you learned as an undergraduate, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, I also want to say that a big part of our program is what we call pre-service teaching. And that is in all of our methods classes, students are required to go out into the public schools and teach mini lessons to real, live, breathing human beings. They have to, sorry.
It's okay.
Second. So they have to teach a lesson either, let's say they're in a woodwind methods class. So they have to take their clarinet, go out into a middle school and get together a group of, 4 to 6 students and then actually teach them a lesson. They record it, they bring it back into class, and then we talk about what happened and how they can get better at it. For our instrumental techniques class, so basically the how to be a band director class, they have to go out and first they have to do a 15-minute lesson to a middle school band, and then they have to go to a high school band and they have to experience what it's like. And I try to really reiterate to them that it's rehearsal, not performance. So they're not gonna kill anybody by trying out some things and discovering what doesn't work and what they're not good at and what they need to get better at. And so that by the time they student teach here, they've been out in the schools 10 or 12 times.
Yeah, that's invaluable.
And I think that's,
Yeah, that's invaluable experience.
Really important part. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So did you set that up, or was that in place when you arrived?
I did set it up, actually.
Can you talk about how you managed that, how you did that?
I actually had no problem whatsoever connecting with schools. Everybody that I approached is very willing to help. And in a lot of cases, they're grateful, to have college students come out and work with their young students. So I would say that has been less of an issue than has been getting the curriculum underway in classes that I don't teach. So asking my colleagues, like, hey, will you add this component to your curriculum? And here's why. Since I've been the chair of the department, it's been a little bit easier, just a little easier to have conversations around an overall program than going up to a colleague and saying, like, hey, I know you teach this class, but I think I have an idea that'll make it better. It can be a little nerve-wracking, especially when you're junior faculty, to have those conversations. So it was a little slow getting started. At first, it was just the classes that I taught that we started it.
I'm struck by
and then expanded.
I'm struck by how you phrase that. You said, we come into the schools to help them, as opposed to them helping you. You didn't ask them for something; you offered them something. I think that's a subtle difference.
Agreed.
But really important.
Yeah. When I initially put it together, I actually got a grant within my university's Center for Effective Teaching and Learning to so I got a little bit of release time to create the program. And so I put together a proposal and said, here's the thing I want to do. And I need some time to go out into the schools and see if this is a possibility. And so that's how it first got started. But yeah, I approached it really as a win-win.
Yeah.
And most teachers remember what it was like to get out into a school for the first time when you're student teaching, and it can be terrifying. And so they were very sympathetic with the idea of giving students more exposure to that for their future teaching selves. So that was great. But around here, especially in Southern California, a lot of the programs need a lot of help. I get calls a lot from educators in the area just saying, hey, do you have any students that want to come out and run sectionals or volunteer? I have so many students and I can't do it all myself. And so in that sense, it was like I said, a real win-win.
Mm-hmm. How big is the program at Cal State LA? Music program in general, just the whole department?
Yeah, we have about 215, 220 majors.
That's significant.
That's great. Yeah, it's grad and undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
And we have, like I said, music ed is a strong program, but we also have performance and jazz studies, and we have composition. We have master's degree. We have a master's degree in Afro-Latin. We have, and commercial music is another big aspect of our program. As you can imagine, being in LA, we have a lot of students interested in film and TV and pop music.
Mm-hmm. And so what niche do you fill in the city as far as the music schools? Are you mostly commuters, or do you have a mix? We're
mostly commuter. We do have on-campus housing, but I believe it's something like only 10% of our students live on campus. So it is mostly commuter. As you might remember from your days in the CSU, we are regional universities. So, there is a region that is supposed to be the Cal State LA region. And then there's, the region that is Fullerton. There's the region that is Northridge, et cetera. So because of that, we are mostly commuter. But, music schools, we do tend to draw from a little bit of a wider range, just depending. But to answer your question, the niche that we serve, for me, I have worked really hard to be the sort of urban music education school, meaning we put an emphasis on training our teachers to be urban music educators, because that's what a lot of them are going to do. They're going to go out and teach in LA Unified School District. Many of them are products of that system, and they themselves want to make a difference and make music education better for everybody. And then I would say the second sort of niche we have is what I mentioned just a minute ago in commercial music. Being a place where composers and performers come to learn the specifics of writing and performing for contemporary medium, film, television, the pop scene. And I have two amazing colleagues, Steve White and Ross Levinson, that are I don't know if I can say this on this podcast, but they're really kicking ass. They're doing amazing things with that program, and I've had the opportunity to observe them, and so that's another, I would say, a niche of ours. Mm-hmm.
I think if I lose my clean rating for that, I think then so be it.
Feel free to bleep it out.
Yeah, I don't like to. So Emily, after the University of Washington, you taught middle school. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see, at University of Washington, you do 2 quarters of student teaching, and they recommend that you do the first quarter, which is part-time, at a level that you think you probably will not teach, and then you do your full-time at a level you think you will teach. And for whatever reason at the time, I just really thought I was going to teach middle school. That was where my head was. I think in part is because of my age. I ended up graduating high school at 16, and I have a summer birthday. I started college at 17. So by the time I was doing my part-time student teaching, I was 20, just before my 21st birthday.
Oh, my.
So I think I was nervous about being so young and teaching high school. I think that I I thought I would feel more comfortable with students. I student taught that spring at Juanita High School with Bruce Gutgazell, who is still teaching and an amazing educator. I learned a ton from him. But anyway, I'll never forget, they were seniors in that band, and I was 20, and here I was getting up in front of them, and it was scary. But
how did that
I
go?
did it. And so anyway,
how did it go?
I'm sorry?
Did they react to that? How did it go? Did they know?
Oh my God, they didn't know. And it's no. I did not say a word, and I how did it go? It was great. I spent my life being around older people. I was always the youngest one around. And so I think I probably carried myself like a 22-year-old, 23-year-old. And it wasn't a problem. I was confident in myself, and there were a couple moments where I was nervous. But I just rolled with it. I just assumed that's what happens when you're a student teaching, that everybody feels that way. And so,
I think so, but
I don't think a
little more extreme than usual, but yeah, I think everyone does.
Yeah. Yeah. So then the following fall, I was a student teacher at Kellogg Middle School in Shoreline, Washington, with Chris Harshman, another person who's an incredible educator who I learned so much from. And as it turned out, I moved away for 2 years and taught middle school down in Arizona. But then when I moved back home to the Seattle area, he got another job, and they called me, and I ended up taking over the job at Kellogg Middle School. So that was really, really neat for me. And I love teaching middle school kids. I had such a wonderful time. And as I tell my students often, middle school, it's such a great time to be a music educator, because you are so influential in shaping their future musical self. And you can really help build a strong community and express themselves in a safe way at a time that can be very volatile. Can be very volatile for young musicians. And so for that reason, I loved it. And I still get to every once in a while work with junior high, middle school kids. And it's a fond memory for sure.
Yeah, I love that age too. I taught at a school that was 7 through 12, and I had a junior high band. My last year, I managed to get the band split, but those were my favorite kids, and they still are. That's why I still write grade 1 and grade 2 music mostly. I just really like that age.
Yeah.
They wear everything. They wear their emotions right on their sleeve. Yeah. So do you have any advice from those years that you pass along to your students that you'd like to pass along to our listeners?
Well, I mean, I'm going to speak more to those years from the perspective of being a beginning teacher. How about that?
Perfect.
So, and this is something that I tell my students all the time. It basically takes 5 years for you to even remotely figure out what the heck you're doing. And so go easy on yourself and realize that you are still learning. You're still learning what it means to be an educator and figuring out what to do. And you're going to screw up. You're going to make mistakes. And your band's not going to sound as good as you want it to. And you're not going to necessarily know how to make them sound better. And just know that is 100% normal. I was in a situation, particularly at Kellogg, where a lot of pressure was put on me to perform. And that district was and still is a very strong music district. And I was trying my very best to do right by those students and teach them what I knew to do. And but it takes time. It takes time, and it was very nerve wracking. So that's what I took away from that from those years. Get a mentor. Have lots of people in your life that you can bounce ideas off of. Talk about not just things like repertoire, but also like, hey, can you listen to this recording of my band? There's something I'm missing. Like we're not quite lining up, or I'm not sure what I'm doing. Watch this video of me teaching, and find ways to improve yourself, because it's just that's what it takes. It takes time to figure out how to do it all. So that's my best advice is to don't be so hard on yourself in the early years.
Being able to reach out to someone for advice is really difficult, I think. I remember being very scared of exposing myself, because I deal with imposter syndrome as a composer all the time, where I feel like I'm just fooling everybody. hey, look, I managed to get through another day. That, that feeling. And I know it's fake, but I carry it around with me. And as a young teacher, when I was teaching, I was really nervous to have people come hear my band.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for your students who you might think would be scared of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I tell my students, have me come out because I know you.
Right.
And
right. Safe.
And you don't, and it's safe. But you just have to check your ego. You just have to check your ego at the beginning and realize that you are learning how to be a teacher, and it takes time in the same way that it took you years and years and years to figure out how to play your instrument well. It's the same thing. These are skills that are learned over time, and there's no quick way to it. And the more you can have people come in and have you have them watch what you do and listen to your group and get feedback, the better. I also encourage them to stay in touch with each other. They create a cohort when they're in school. You kind of the beauty of music training. You have this group of people that you can go through all these classes together. And call each other up and stay in touch, and because you're going to be going through the same things at the same time. And that's the way you get better. But there is certainly a lot of pressure to perform quickly and to have an excellent group immediately, especially when they're coming out of a college program where they know what their group sounded like, meaning the college ensemble they were just performing in, and they think, oh well, I've got to get my group to sound like that right away. Which actually leads me to, this is kind of a segue to a slightly different topic, but another advice that I would give, and that I tell not just my students, but basically any music educator that'll listen to me. Look at the kind of repertoire you want to do, what you think your group is going to do, and then basically take it down one notch, and then you'll probably be at the right place.
Yeah,
I think just far too often, especially novice teachers, they overprogram. And it's just a lack of knowing the repertoire, a lack of knowing quality repertoire that's, grade 2, grade 3. And then the pressure, especially at the high school level. Well, we're a high school band and we have to play grade 4, or we have to play grade 5. And then they just sound bad. And I feel very strong in the belief that play music that is accessible, and then really play the snot out of it, make it beautiful, make them sound really good.
Do you have any?
And that's where you build success.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much music. I've talked with other guests about this before, about how to pick music. How do you sort through and sift through the mountain of music? Do you have any tips you give to students about that, or to other educators about how to kind of find the pieces that they might not know?
Go to the Midwest.
Go,
talk to directors that you really respect, that have been around a little bit longer, because they would have had some hits and misses, and they can pass that on to you. Certainly the Teaching Music Through Performance in Band series is immensely helpful for people starting out, because it's already been vetted, more or less. And, there's some hits and misses in there as well. I think.
Sure.
But it's already been whittled down significantly. And you can kind of start from that point.
Yeah. State lists are helpful. Getting in touch with certain publishers who you trust and going through their lists, knowing that some of that is motivated by other things, but those are good starting points. I think you're right. Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned having you come into the room, or having people come in to help. How much have you had worked with composers as far as commissions, or having them come in with work a piece of theirs? Have you done much of that?
Yeah. I think so. I've probably been in on, 5 or so consortium projects. I would say the limitation of doing them has almost always been finances, more than desire to do it or not. I had my first lead commission last year with Benjamin Taylor, and we did a piece together, and I was the lead consortium member, and it was for wind band and video.
Oh, cool.
And it was awesome. We had a fantastic time, and Ben came to the campus and, you know, interacted with the students, and that was really valuable.
What's the title of the piece?
Just Seeds of Glass.
Cool.
It's called Seeds of Glass, and he himself created the video from source material online. The particular artist that created it is, I'm just forgetting it right now, but, you know, he called the guy up or emailed him and said, "Hey, can I use your stuff?" And he said, "Cool, sounds like a great project." And so it was great. The audience just loved it. It was so well received when we premiered it here. That for its newness and kind of feeling like we're pushing the medium in a certain direction. It was great. I have done pieces by both of our composition faculty here. And so, you know, having your colleague come in and speak with the group and work with them that way has been really cool. We're actually right now doing a U.S. premiere of my colleague John Kennedy, who this last spring had a Fulbright where he was in Malta and was working at the university there. And he wrote this piece that has to do with, you know, World War II and Malta's involvement and the U.S. allies forces and et cetera, et cetera. And it's for, I think, 6 brass and 3 percussion. And we're gonna do the U.S. premiere of that next week. So stuff like that has been great. I love the opportunity for my students to interact with composers. I think it's a wonderful thing, and we're really lucky in the wind band world that we have as many opportunities as we do for that.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you put it that way, because as a composer, I think I'm really lucky to be in the wind band world. You know, It kind of goes both ways. It's such a collaborative world.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, indeed.
So let me ask you some of my sort of questions I ask everybody. And so I'm going to start by what hard-earned lessons as a teacher, as a conductor, have you learned that you might want to pass on?
Yeah, the only reason why I'm hesitating with this question, it's not at all because I haven't screwed up and learned some lessons. But none of them, I would say, I wish hadn't happened. Because everything that I did where I screwed up or had to learn the hard way, was something I treasure as a really great lesson that I learned, that I took away from it. I mean, I would say the biggest thing is something that I've already spoke to, and that is overprogramming. You know, those are the hardest lessons to learn, I think. And anybody who says they've never done it is lying, because it happens to all of us. And those are the moments, because I know that 100% I pick the music. It's on me. And so when I've put my students in a position where they didn't play their best because I maybe stretched them a little too far, that's a hard one for me. It hasn't happened as much lately because I have learned. I would also say a result of that lesson is a shifting of my expectations. And let me just say that I am an educator first and foremost. That's how I identify myself. And every musical experience I give my students is one that I hope that they grow and learn from. And sometimes that means if we didn't play our best, taking the time to be reflective and have a conversation around what happened and how we can grow as people, as human beings, as musicians from those experiences. And it really frees you up. It really frees you up to experience your time with your students in a more meaningful way. We just got back from a band tour about a week and a half ago. And I would say about a week and a half before we left, I was in the space of, oh no, I think I finally did it here at Cal State LA. I think I gave them too much music. I don't know. I was ready to cut something, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And in the end, they did a remarkable job of coming together, of pushing themselves. And I can tell you, the first concert of our tour was rough. It didn't. They were super nervous, and we made some pretty big mistakes. And it was fine. This audience still enjoyed it. But the next concert was a lot better. And the concert after that was a lot better. And just watching them go through that and learning each time how to make the music better was just such a proud moment for me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it sounds like the hard-earned lesson is allowing yourself to have hard-earned lessons.
I like that.
So in your estimation, and this is a big question and it's hard to take everything in, but what are the challenges facing music education as we go forward into the 21st century?
Well, I don't think it's dissimilar to the challenges facing classical music in general. Classical music and jazz, we finding a way to remain relevant and finding a way to make our existence invaluable, I would say, has been an ongoing issue for music education. And moving into the 21st century, as the creation of music has become more and more easy with technologies, it leaves people questioning, well, what on earth is a school band for? I can just go and use GarageBand and do all these other technologies and just make my own music. I don't need to study it necessarily. That being said, I think then having GarageBand orchestra, trying to facilitate that in the school music setting, I think should be taken cautiously. I stand firmly in the belief that the creation of acoustic music is a powerful human experience that we as a species have done since our existence, and you just have to ask anybody who's experienced it in a deep, meaningful way, and it's life changing.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
So that being said, I think this is something that actually the Wind Band is doing really well these days, and that is being innovative and having new music come about, and finding ways to integrate forms of music into what is traditionally the classical form.
Sure.
So I talk with my students obviously about teaching philosophy and why do they want to teach, and this to me is an extremely important conversation now more than ever, because there has to be a driving force to why any person should want to walk into your music classroom and choose it. Are you creating community? Are you creating a lifelong love of the aesthetic experience?
Yeah.
Are you channeling students' human emotion and helping them be self-expressive?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, I want a marching band that's going to win a trophy.
Right. Or, we've had lots of conversations on this podcast about that.
Yeah. And this is, Southern California, I'm sure where you are as well, is just crazy in marching bands.
Mm-hmm.
And so, which, many argue is a wonderful thing for certain students, but I find the importance of aesthetic experiences and the sheer joy and pleasure you can find from creating that with other people.
Mm-hmm.
We are social beings, and if that is what is created through those forms, drum corps, marching bands, then that's great. So be it.
I agree. I'm also the opinion that a rising tide lifts all boats, and that we should celebrate every aspect of music making that we can, because it helps all of us.
Yeah.
If you had a last piece to conduct, you had one more shot, and then you were going to hang up the baton and go retire and never conduct again, which I know is not realistic, but what piece would it be? The last one.
I'm going to speak about a piece that deeply moved me and was a transformative musical experience in my life. And I've never conducted it, so maybe that will be one that I will hopefully have a chance to do. And it's Symphony No. 3 by James Barnes.
Yeah.
Do you know this piece?
Yeah, I do. It's magnificent. I've never played it or conducted it myself either, but man, it's something.
What I can tell you is that it is. I'm actually in a cold, air-conditioned office right now, getting chills thinking about the piece because it's so deeply meaningful. And just for your listeners who maybe don't know it, he wrote it immediately following the death of his young daughter. And so it is this absolute epic journey through human emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's deeply, deeply moving. And to me, that's what music is. That's what music is. And then to be able to bring to life someone's experience and, help them as a composer and help the musicians, experience life in that way, is really something special. And, so yeah, I'm going to go with that.
Well, it's a great answer. And you're not the first person to mention that piece. So,
oh, wow.
I know you have to go very soon, but I do want to say that we're the beginning of October, 2017. Is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote, knowing that this may last a long time on the internet?
I will just say for other college band directors that might be listening to this, I am an officer on the board of the Western Division of CBDNA, our College Band Directors National Association. And this organization is so important to me. And I hope that college band directors, future college band directors, are members, because as an organization, I think we do a lot of really great work just in supporting each other professionally and otherwise. And I'm a really proud board member. And so if nothing else, I'll just promote our organization as something that I think is really important in our field. Excellent.
And how can people get in touch with you?
Email. Okay. ema2@calstatela.edu. And I love hearing from people who have questions about music education or repertoire or conducting. I will sometimes hear from future band directors who are female, and they just want to ask a question about what that's like. And I just want to say hats off to you that we didn't talk about that.
Well, we might have. I thought about it.
By the way, I would do another complete other podcast episode just about that as an issue if you ever wanted to.
I would love to talk about that.
I do have some strong opinions, and but I tend to also not talk about it that much because I'm just me.
Emily, I know you have to run. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and keep doing this cool work.